Okay, so I just wanted to talk about the whole entire genre of horror in video games. Now, um, you can see three games that are actually horror games, one of which has essentially fallen so far from its roots, it's not even funny. Now, Soma and Dead Space are two completely different games. Resident Evil has more in common with Dead Space than Soma does with either of the two. However, in terms of horror, Soma and Dead Space are indeed scary. At least I think they're scary. Um, Resident Evil, on the other hand, with the exception to the remastered HD games, Capcom hasn't released a single Resident Evil game that, well, really is scary. There really is nothing that is scary other than the remasters that they plan on doing. Now, I keep hearing that Resident Evil 2 will indeed be rebuilt completely and will have gameplay style very much like Resident Evil 4, so it's going to be over the shoulder tank controls rather than static camera angle tank controls, which will be very interesting because I am wondering if, Resident Evil 2 in that fashion will be, well received, or if the purists will come on out and say that, oh, well, it sucks just because it's not, static camera angles. I mean, I could probably see them giving people the option to do a static camera angle mode in the game, like call it classic mode or something like that, and then just, play it in static camera angles or play it in over the shoulder mode. Now, I'm not exactly sure how much, you know, power a PC or game console would need to actually do that. I'm not exactly sure what exactly is required for that to actually happen. I'm sure they would probably have to do some weird crap with the engine. And, Resident Evil 2 already had plenty of like static, JPEGs, to build the levels. None of it was actual models. The only thing that we saw about that, or actually had real life freaking 3D models, was the Resident Evil HD remastered, which actually had the tomb, which was completely and totally remastered and actually built with actual 3D models, not just JPEGs. However, despite Resident Evil's the older games and Resident Evil 2 looking kind of like Resident Evil 4, it really isn't scary. Resident Evil hasn't exactly been scary. Resident Evil 4 to me wasn't scary. It was fun, but not scary. It had its moments, but it wasn't exactly horror. Resident Evil 5 wasn't scary at all. I will say, though, not entirely not scary. It had its moments like Resident Evil 4, but it had fewer moments than Resident Evil 4. And then in Resident Evil 6, it essentially just turned into, a freaking Call of Duty mixed with Left 4 Dead, and it was not scary at all. And, it had one moment. Okay, just one level really dedicated to actual horror, and it was in the Leon campaign, and that was it. The rest of it was just third person, freaking Ghost Recon zombies. That's all it was. Ghost Recon zombies. And apparently now Capcom is making another game called Resident Evil Umbrella Corps, which is the same thing, Ghost Recon zombies, but online this time. So yeah, third person Call of Duty Ghost Recon clone with zombies mixed in. How exactly that's a Resident Evil game, I have no idea. Now, Dead Space as well has a multiplayer option that was only in Dead Space 2. Dead Space 1, 2, and I even think 3 were very scary. 3 not as scary as 1 and 2. I think the whole entire idea of being trapped on the space station or spaceship scares me more than being trapped on the planet. Because at least in the planet, it's not all confined. You can go wherever you want there. But on a spaceship and you're in a confined, narrow corridor with, zombies crawling around in the frickin' vents, yeah, I'd be creeped out about that. I think all the Dead Space games are very scary. None of them were really, to the point where it's like, I can't go on because it's too scary, but they were indeed, scary. It was scary. I felt, It was fun to play. It was scary. Yes, it has jump scares, some of which are cheap trolley jump scares. Like if you go ahead and you see this random box in the middle of a room and it has like some really awesome ammo in it or something, and then you go ahead and pick it up, a random necromorph just comes out of the freaking window or the freaking vent and just like plops out of nowhere and just decides to start slashing at you just at that right moment. So that's one thing. Dead Space is indeed scary. Just it has some jump scare moments that can be considered cheap. I remember one in particular in Dead Space 1 where you go to access a workbench, and the first thing that happens once you access the workbench, a necromorph pops out of nowhere and starts attacking you while you're in the workbench. I'm not kidding, and it literally scared the crap out of me. I was just like, it was a cheap jump scare. It was a trolley jump scare. Like, oh, you want to go to the workbench? Well, guess what? You got this. This is gonna happen to you too. So I dread every time I replay Dead Space, even though I know it's there. I dread using that workbench when I get to that point, because then I'm just like, well, do I have my gun at the ready? Will I be able to turn around fast enough to shoot him? That's what I'm always thinking whenever I get to that point. But yeah, Dead Space 1 and 3 were fairly scary. I thought 1 and 2 were scarier than 3, but 3 was pretty good. Soma, and I probably should have put Amnesia the Dark Descent in here too, but I think Soma kind of covers, all the other games that Frictional has made. So, Soma is essentially just a horror game without any guns. Now, I know a lot of people will probably go ahead and complain that, oh, well, games without guns are boring, blah, 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 blah. But in my personal opinion, games like Soma or like Clock Tower, which essentially don't allow you to kill the enemy, are actually the scariest. Because then you can't kill it, you can't get rid of it, it's constantly on your ass, and you're kind of forced to, deal with the fact that it's there and also complete your objective at the same time. I like those types of games. I know Soma and Clock Tower are two completely different, games in terms of like, overall gameplay and whatnot. But I find them to be good because they don't allow you to actually kill the enemy. He's constantly following you, and that's why I like Soma. Soma does not let you kill the enemy. It's constantly, chasing after you. You have to avoid it. You cannot confront it. There's no way to kill it. And, I like that. I like games like that. I like that. And, I know a lot of people will probably come out and say, well, what about Alien Isolation? I loved Alien Isolation. If you've watched Aliens, you'll know that the aliens cannot be killed by traditional weapons. They can only be killed by pulse rifles, which I believe have a basic armor-piercing rounds, I believe, or standard armor-piercing rounds. I don't know what type of armor-piercing round it is, but they need armor-piercing rounds in order to pierce through the alien skin. And Alien Isolation to me was amazing. I loved that game so much. Like, I replay it every once in a while. I might actually replay it because it's Halloween now. I just want to play it again. And I've been wanting to get it on my Xbox One. I have it on my Xbox 360. It was a little chunky in some areas in terms of frame rate, but in all honesty, I still enjoyed it. I want to get it on my Xbox One. Better frame rate, consistent 30. I wish I had a powerful PC to play it, but I'll just get it on my Xbox One and see how it goes on there. But yeah, I loved Alien Isolation. You can't kill the alien with traditional weapons. You need armor-piercing rounds. That's why you cannot kill the alien with any guns in that game. The human foes and the cyborg enemies were essentially just kind of I would consider cannon fodder, because I would always figure out a way to get rid of them real easy. I would either throw something and then they would just run off in that one direction and investigate it, or I just blast them to bits or torch them all with my flamethrower. They were fairly easy. The cyborgs in certain parts of the games, which that were immune to flames and Molotovs and grenades that had like armor on, they were a bit more difficult, but yet again, they weren't that difficult to handle. The real scare of the game really wasn't the cyborgs, though they were kind of creepy when, they looked like freaking mannequins, for Christ's sake. The humans were just kind of like annoying in some points because it was like, oh, well, don't you think we should probably be working together to kill this thing rather than, killing each other? You're just essentially, creating more noise here when you shoot some guy. So that's something they had to keep in mind, but apparently nobody on Sevastopol realized that, shooting will attract the thing. How long has this thing been on board? But anyway, it's interesting, and it was fun to play through. The alien was really the scares of the game, and yes, there were scares with the cyborgs. The human foes, in my personal opinion, weren't scary. They were just annoying, and honestly, I felt as though that they were in there for a reason. They put the human people in there for a reason. The people, blah, 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 because they wanted you to feel that there are still people in there, or that there were people working there. But I didn't. I thought they were just kind of cannon fodder, just like shoot them and be done with them, or just completely avoid them. I found myself shooting them more, or at the very least throwing like some distraction away so I can just get rid of them out of my way. But anyway, Alien Isolation I thought was the best horror game. I loved it over all of the games that you're seeing here. But I do love these games. I love Resident Evil. I still like it, even though it hasn't been really based on horror much lately. I'm really excited for Resident Evil, 0 and then Resident Evil 2 Remastered. I really want to buy those games. They're going to be remastered, and I hope they do well. I really do. I'm really interested in seeing how Resident Evil 2 is going to be. I keep hearing that it's going to be like rebuilt, not like just, up-res, but rebuilt. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and see you guys later.